Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
We begin in Washington, where a government shutdown may be a step closer to being averted. Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger has the latest.
Congressional leaders in the White House have reached a handshake deal to fund the federal government through the rest of the fiscal year. Sources tell Bloomberg News consensus finally came last night with an agreement on the Department of Homeland Security. Disputes over border security and migrant processing had held up those talks. A short government shutdown over the weekend is still possible. Congressional aides need to write the text, and it needs to be published for 72 hours under House rules before it can come up for a vote. Jeff Bellinger, Bloomberg Radio.
Right, Jeff, thank you. Now to the latest from the Middle East. President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held their first call in more than a month to try to ease tensions over Israel's war in Gaza. Netanyahu agreed to send a group of advisors to Washington to talk about his planned invasion of Rafah. Now, former President Trump is inserting himself into the debate in an interview with former White House aide Sebastian Gorka.
Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion, they hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves because Israel will be destroyed.
The former president accused Democrats of wanting votes from people who sympathize with the Palestinians. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading back to the Middle East for his sixth visit since the Gaza war broke out. He's been in Europe and Asia since last week. Now he'll extend his trips with stops in Saudi Arabia and Egypt to push for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas.
And in another political note, Karen, Bloomberg News has learned the former president, Donald Trump, has ruled out Vivek Ramaswamy as a potential running mate. Sources tell us Trump told the entrepreneur personally he won't be his vice presidential pick, but he is considering Ramaswamy for a cabinet position, including as a possible Homeland Security secretary.
Well, we turn to the economy now, Nathan. The Fed kicks off its two-day policy meeting. After a couple of recent hot inflation reads, economists now see no chance of a rate cut tomorrow. Dana Dauria, co-CIO at Envestnet, agrees.
We started the year with such a high expectation of rate cuts, and it really didn't make a lot of sense with where the data was, right? The Fed had said at the end of last year, higher for longer. Well, obviously, the Fed's mandate is inflation and employment, and both of those point very strongly at this point to not cutting. So I don't think anybody's expecting a rate cut this week, and I think that's been fully priced in. The question, of course, is what is Powell going to say? I would expect that he does come out trying to thread the needle.
And Envestnet's Dana Dauria adds that the most recent inflation data, while not extreme, speaks to stickiness in the economy. The Fed has kept its benchmark rate in a range between 5.25% and 5.5% since July.
And in Asia, Karen, the Bank of Japan has ended the most aggressive monetary stimulus program in modern history. The BOJ is scrapping the world's last negative interest rate while leaving the course of additional hikes unclear. Bank of Japan Governor Kazuo Ueda spoke at a news conference after the decision. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel has more from Tokyo.
Ueda also announced in this press conference that the wage gains played a big role in his decision. But again, he's also kind of downplaying the possibility or the need right now, given the current situation, for further tightening. They're going to remain accommodative for a while. How long is a while? We simply don't know.
Bloomberg's Stephen Engel says this was the BOJ's first hike in 17 years. And checking the yen this morning, it is weakening against the dollar, now at 150.40.
Well, staying in Asia, Nathan, Chinese regulators say the developer Evergrande falsely inflated revenue by more than $78 billion in the 2 years leading to its failure. The Chinese Securities Regulatory Commission lays much of the blame on the company's founder, Hui Ka-yan. Bloomberg's Asia government correspondent Rebecca Chun-Wilkins says the ruling marks the unwinding of a decade-long roller coaster for China's real estate market.
Evergrande was sort of always the bad boy of the real estate sector. It was always, for the last decade, the story had been of it coming to the brink of these liquidity crises, but always, somehow improbably, finding a way to hang on.
And Bloomberg's Rebecca Chun-Wilkins adds the action may pave the way for more serious charges against Hui.
In Europe, Karen, on the first anniversary of UBS's historic takeover of its former rival Credit Suisse, it is becoming clear just how advantageous that deal's been for the bank. Let's get the details in London with Bloomberg Daybreak Europe anchor Caroline Hepker.
Nathan and Karen, good morning. Scandals, losses and client withdrawals meant Credit Suisse was foisted on UBS last March in an emergency deal masterminded by Swiss authorities. A year on, UBS has come up smelling of roses. CEO Sergio Ermotti is integrating the two banks. UBS's share price hit a 16-year high this month, so a market cap of more than $100 billion. And different concerns, keeping a lid on costs and being systematically important. A balance sheet for UBS that is twice the size of Switzerland's entire economy. In London, Caroline Hepker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Caroline, thank you. Well, back here on Wall Street, the average bonus dropped last year. We get that story from Bloomberg's John Tucker.
According to an analysis by the New York State Comptroller, the average annual cash bonus fell 2% last year to just over $176,000. The drop was far less dramatic than it was in 2022, when the average bonus slumped 25%. The slump in mergers and initial public offerings continues to weigh on banker bonuses as interest rates remain elevated. Meanwhile, even with firms including Citigroup cutting jobs, New York securities industry continues to see an increase in total employment. The workforce climbed to more than 198,000 last year, and that's the highest level in more than 2 decades. John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, John, thank you. In company news, NVIDIA has unveiled the successor to its famed artificial intelligence processor. The tech giant shared designs for a new chip called Blackwell. It's multiple times faster than its current processor at a conference in California. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang says Blackwell is a more effective version of the previous Hopper design.
Form, fit, function compatible to Hopper. And so you slide on Hopper and you push in Blackwell. That's the reason why one of the challenges of ramping is going to be so efficient. Same design, the power, the electricity, the thermals, the software, identical.
Jensen Huang's NVIDIA is the first chip maker to have a market capitalization of more than $2 trillion. It trails only Microsoft and Apple.
And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Karen. A judge has ruled that Donald Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, and adult film star Stormy Daniels will be allowed to testify at the former president's New York criminal trial. Trump's hush money trial could begin next month. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office charged Trump with falsifying business records and concealing the reimbursement of payments made to Daniels before the 2016 election about an alleged affair with Trump. Trump denies the allegations. Former Trump advisor Peter Navarro must report to prison today after losing his last chance Supreme Court appeal to stay out. Navarro will spend the next 4 months in prison near Miami. He is the only former White House official ever jailed for contempt of Congress. The U.S. Supreme Court has extended its block on a Texas law that would allow police to arrest migrants. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Under the law, police would have broad powers to arrest migrants suspected of entering the U.S. while the legal battle of immigration authority is played out. The Biden administration sued to strike it down, arguing it would usurp core federal authority on immigration. Civil rights groups have argued the law could lead to racial profiling. Texas argued the law mirrored federal law and that it had to address the crisis at its border. Justice Samuel Alito did not put an expiration date on this one, but said pending further appeal. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
New York Mayor Eric Adams has been accused of sexually assaulting a woman in 1993. A lawsuit was filed in Manhattan's Supreme Court yesterday against Adams. The woman claims she approached Adams and asked for help with a workplace issue. Adams was then an NYPD officer and president of the Police Guardians Association. According to the allegations in the lawsuit, Adams then demanded the woman, who was a city employee at the time, perform a sex act in a car. She first filed her notice of claim in November, telling the court she planned to sue Adams for sexual assault. Adams has vehemently denied the allegations. Secretary of State Antony Blinken plans to underscore Washington's ironclad commitment to its alliance with the Philippines as he meets today with top officials in Manila. He visited a facility that makes U.S. semiconductors. Blinken stressed the importance of the U.S.-Philippines partnership in the semiconductor industry.
The Philippines is a thriving partner and a critical partner, indeed an increasingly critical partner in the semiconductor supply chain.
Next month, President Joe Biden will host the leaders of the Philippines and Japan in a White House summit amid growing concerns over Chinese actions in the South China Sea and North Korea's nuclear program. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. And it's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. It's brought to you by Tri-State Audi, and we bring in John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Knicks enjoying life out west. 3 games on this trip, 3 victories. They beat the Warriors 119-112. They did it without OG Anunoby, who recently returned from a long absence. He has re-injured his elbow. Could be out a while again. Deuce McBride started in his place. Played almost the entire game. Scored 29 points. Jalen Brunson scored 34. Josh Hart played all 48 minutes. He had a triple-double. The Knicks coach, Tom Thibodeau.
This team has demonstrated all year there's a lot of fight, a lot of heart, a lot of toughness, and a lot of togetherness to the group. So there's a belief that we can win. We always talk about our defense, our rebounding, taking care of the ball. I thought we shared the ball extremely well tonight.
Road trip ends Thursday in Denver. NBA mismatch in Boston. Celtics by 25 over the Pistons. Capitals won 5-2 at Calgary as Alex Ovechkin reached 20 goals for the 19th year in a row. Only others to do that, Brendan Shanahan and Gordie Howe. Rangers tonight hosting Winnipeg. NCAA tournament begins tonight. As always in Dayton, the first of the first 4 games has Wagner taking on Howard. Took until just before opening day, but free agent Blake Snell has a deal to pitch for the San Francisco Giants. It's short-term, 2 years, $62 million. He can opt out after 1 season. The Yankees steered clear of Snell even after the Garrett Cole injury. And the Yankees have another injury. Could be without DJ LeMahieu for next Thursday's opener. He has what Aaron Boone termed a pretty significant bruised bone in his foot. That sit-down between the PGA Tour and the head of the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund that backs the LIV Tour took place in the Bahamas. PGA Commissioner Jay Monahan said the 2 sides have a shared vision, still need to work through several key issues. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports.
Let's get more now on the politics. This handshake deal to keep the threat of a government shutdown on hold for at least another 6 months, and the politics of the Middle East now playing into the presidential race. We're joined now by Bloomberg News managing editor Derek Wallbank. Good to talk with you, Derek, on this morning after we learned that there's this handshake deal to keep the rest of the government open that was due to run out of funds at the end of the week. What does this say about the 6 months of fighting over spending levels, over border security, that we're just going to keep the government funded another 6 months?
You know, I think that it's a really interesting, really interesting conclusion if this holds and if there are the votes to do this. I think if there are the votes is less of a question than if this holds, because I want to be really, really clear that we have had things that sound like deals that then start to get a lot of consternation and things of that nature. And I think, you know, we've all lived through a lot of that. So you do have to put that caveat on things at this point. But there's certainly no appetite among congressional leaders of any party for a shutdown. I think Republicans realize that previous shutdowns in the last decade plus have not gone well for them, particularly because I'm not sure that they see a path between this and extracting anything that some on the right side of their conference think that they can get out of it. So the idea is basically, why go into a shutdown if you don't know how you're going to win, if you don't know what you're going to be able to get out of it, and there's not really a clear sense that they could get anything out of it. So you figure out what your best deal possible is, you put that on the table. Democrats plus a lot of Republicans equals a majority to be able to go through this. There's a possibility that you might be looking at trying to get through to suspension of the rules, which is a fast-track procedure that requires 2/3. You might be able to get that gets that through, and then that sets up September 30 as a big date whereby you do have to get something done, and that's a month and change before the big election. So yes, this is kicking the can down the road. I think that had been always the professional expectation, but keep in mind Kevin McCarthy was ousted, and spending was one of the reasons that people on the right flank gave for trying to get rid of him, and so a lot of consternation has been had over this issue to end up where we've ended up.
Along with the fighting over spending, we've got the fighting in the Middle East now playing into the presidential race. President Biden and Israel's prime minister just had their first call in about a month, and now we're hearing from the former president saying things like Jewish Democrats hate their religion and hate Israel. What to make of how this is playing into the presidential race now?
Well, I think Benjamin Netanyahu has been somebody who has done a lot to ally himself with the right flank. I mean, there's no secret that Netanyahu and Trump had a much closer public relationship than Netanyahu and Joe Biden have had, right? And this has been a point of consternation. We've talked before among Democrats. Chuck Schumer with a pretty solid break there in recent days. Biden and Netanyahu have to find a way to work together. In some ways, though, right? Israel is reliant on the U.S. for a lot of things. Biden wants to be pro-Israel, generally speaking, but has things that he cannot tolerate that Israel has done vis-a-vis Gaza. Is not happy with the way that Israel is prosecuting the war in a lot of respects, and so there are real points of contention in that relationship. Trump is trying to use this to his electoral benefit, but in ways that I think many Democrats find to be quite problematic.
Yeah.
So there's a lot at play here, and I think this is a difficult sort of thing, but you can expect.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.